So if you've been playing various gacha games, you might have noticed that some of the big guns like Hoyoverse games, Genshin, HSR, ZZZ, and also games like Wuthering Waves have really been decreasing the number of 4-star characters that they make. These days we get like one 4-star character for every 3 to 4 updates, or even longer. It is quite strange, and some people have complained about it. Some of the players get really frustrated because these games are focusing more on selling 5-star characters that many people probably won't be able to get thanks to low drop rate with less than 1% chance, high pity, and chance of losing the 50-50. Even games that used to pump low-star characters like FGO has really been decreasing their character counts. It is understandable that why people complain. We as a human being by nature always like seeing and trying something new, and many players are either F2P or low spenders, and there's no way they will be able to pull all 5-star characters on every single banner. Which is why having a new 4-star characters can make up for that. It feels like they make some progress by having these characters in their collection. And now, these games really drop their 4-star characters. No wonder people get frustrated, right? There's one recent case, which is one of the more recent dramas, is Wuthering Waves Zani drama, where people complain that Zani needs Phoebe to operate, while in reality, Spectral Rover can compensate for that to a certain extent. Phoebe is a limited character, and Spectral Rover might be needed in a different forms. Soon, especially. But for now, Spectral Rover is still doing a pretty good job in covering for Zani, and yet people are still demanding a 4-star character that can play well with Zani. Even for HSR, Amphorius has been out for a while, and yet all the Chrysos heirs are 5-star. So why do we barely see a 4-star character in these games? So in this video, we're going to try to analyze and speculate the reason why 4-star characters counts have dropped as gacha games get older. So join me and leave your thoughts in the comment section regarding this particular topic. Anything is fine. Anyway, what's up guys, KKaceh here. I make discussion content about video games, especially gacha games, that focuses more on game design or critique. So if you like this kind of video, do subscribe to my channel so all of us can learn together and be more critical about video games. Oh, before we start, I just want to say I'm making this analysis based only on gacha games that I played, which are FGO, Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, Wuthering Waves, and maybe even Reverse 1999 to a certain extent. Anyway, let's get into that discussion. I think one of the biggest reason for this particular issue is the philosophy from the game design perspective. Uniqueness versus a weaker version of a 5-star character. When you just started the game, the number of 5-star characters are fairly limited and they are pretty difficult to get. Therefore, you will need the 4-star characters to fill that spot until you're able to get the needed 5-star characters at the early stage of the game, as the 4-star characters should be sufficient enough to clear all kinds of challenges that is the game provided at launch. However, as the game progresses, people start to settle in and have solid teams to clear challenges, albeit perhaps not even with the maximum rewards, like maxing Abyss or MOC for example. So maybe some of the 4-star characters end up being benched by many players at this point. But from the game development side, as the game grows older, developers will be hit with a question. Do we want to make a game where each character feels unique with their own mechanics so they feel more special in our game? Or do we want to make 2 characters with the same mechanic, just like how usually at launch there are 4-star characters and 5-star characters that share roles and mechanics? Usually the stronger one is a 5-star character and the weaker one is a 4-star character. There are pros and cons for both cases, where the former is probably more immersive for players who can appreciate uniqueness in gacha games, and I think it is also more fun to make for the developers because as a creator, usually you don't want to make something similar or same twice. However, this can be bad for F2P and low spending players, because if we prioritize uniqueness, most likely developers are only going to make 5-star characters. For the latter case, where we make two characters that share similar mechanics, it is probably better for players who cannot afford collecting all 5-star characters, or they refuse to pull for them due to design or gameplay preference. So by having the 4-star characters, they can tackle the most recent challenges that usually have specific mechanics with new characters until they're able to get the required 5-star characters. But this design choice of having two similar characters, the moment they obtain the 5-star version, the 4 stars become obsolete and they're just going to gather dust. Honestly, it's kinda a waste of a design, in my opinion at least. So if you want to pay attention to gacha game companies, from my perspective, it feels like Hoyoverse Games and Kuro Wuthering Waves, they decided to take the first approach of making characters more unique and played differently from each other. And because of that, there's no need to keep pumping more 4-star characters. This is very noticeable, especially for Wuthering Waves. At launch, they have Verena and Baiji, and Verena just outperformed Baiji. And then Shorekeeper comes out, and Baiji just completely got shelved. And I think Kuro is trying to avoid that mistakes again. So yeah, basically, developers also need to think whether they should prioritize uniqueness or the needs of people who cannot afford to get the 5-star character. And once again, in this case, it feels like most companies prioritize uniqueness, as we can feel that from Honkai Star Rail, that if you pay attention, almost all characters play quite differently, and the way they fulfill their role is quite different as well, even though they usually have their more best team. Anyway, following up with the first point, after thinking whether they want to make a unique character or making two versions of characters with the same mechanic, as a company, of course they need to think about their sales. Gacha games always want to sell their limited characters, therefore they cannot make their 4-star characters to be too strong, otherwise they won't be able to sell the 5-star characters. If 4 stars are able to perform as well as 5-star, what's the point in trying to pull a character that might require you over 160 pulls, while a 4-star characters might only need 10 pulls, and people have no desire to spend in 5-star characters because of that. So for most people, they will try to just to get the affordable one, right? So basically, 4-star characters competing with 5-star characters, sales and resource wise. And speaking of resource, to create a characters, you need manpower from concept design, coding, gameplay design, and many more roles in order for that character to be implemented into the game. Therefore, they need to add more manpower if they want to create more 4-star characters every update, for example. So maybe the management side of the business might want to prioritize that resources to create something that can generate more revenue. Therefore, they decided to use that resources to create a 5-star characters, or maybe even allocate them for future collaboration with other brands, for example. So to avoid making them to be too strong while at the same time they're not sharing their kit with a 5-star character, therefore now they can only make a 4-star characters that fill a specific niche that everyone can use in some way, because they don't want to create too underwhelming or too overpowered characters. I suppose for Hoyoverse case, they have learned from their mistakes in Genshin, where they created 4-star characters very often, but they're always very underwhelming compared to the launch 4-star characters. And I think they have only done it better more recently, since around maybe Chefru's release. And now Genshin also doesn't release their 4-star characters that often either. And the ones they do release, they do have their own specific use, be it from specific support or for explorations. So now let's take a look at Honkai Star Rail and see whether their more recent 4-star characters are actually niche, as I've mentioned before. For example, during Major version 2, we only got 4 4-star characters, which are Misha, Gallagher, Moza, and a free March 7th. Misha is a bit weird. Misha was more like a substitute ice DPS for new player, while Gallagher is a meta-relevant healer that is needed for Super Break team, even now, if you don't have Lingsha especially, or if you're trying to bring to Super Break team, Gallagher is still a very solid choice that sometimes a better alternative than Lingsha, like in Acheron or Castor's team for example. While Moza is a follow-up sub-DPS and a support for follow-up team, which currently being overshadowed by March 7th. However, once March receives a new path for her 4-star version, Moza will probably be used again, while the new March path can be used in another team. So, as you guys can see, outside Misha, the rest of the characters are not all-purpose character and they are not DPS. They have a very specific role to fulfill and they do a pretty good job at it. So it kind of feels that they realized this particular point of not making 4-star characters that don't do much after Misha was released. Maybe they did some kind of team evaluation or something. And since March 7th, we haven't got any new 4-star characters. So how long has it been now? 4 or 5 versions? People are still waiting for Mr. Rekka. And if you want to study about ZZZ in this case, ZZZ only had Seth and Pulchra outside the launch rosters for 4-star character. So it's about 7 version now. So about 7 versions, they only release 2 new 4-star characters. And at 2.0, we know that we're getting a new 4-star character, the Panda Defense character. And if you want to take a look at the new 4-star characters that they release, and whether they actually fit that specific niche pattern that I mentioned before, Seth is a good defender that provides some buff and works very well with Jane. So Seth is a unique character among agents that currently only have 2 other characters in the defense class. For sure, he has his own role to fulfill in Jane team especially. Next we got Pulchra, a stun agent that can be off-field to deal follow-up attacks. Another unique character that is mostly being used as cheaper alternative for those who doesn't have trigger. But around this time, the devs introduced a new gameplay, which is called Aftershock. And by adding Pulchra, it allows new player or F2P to be able to enjoy the Aftershock mechanic as well. And Pulchra will be a good asset to have if in the future more Aftershock characters are being released. So, after studying the case of Star Rail and ZZZ, seeing this pattern, most likely we will rarely going to see a 4-star main DPS or universal support that can be used in most teams and situations, because as of late, as I mentioned before, the latest characters, they are very niche. They do it this way so that they can avoid direct competition with 4-stars, while at the same time, these 4-star characters can stay relevant for a very long time. But of course, not to mention, there's a possibility that from management or executive point of view, 4-stars just doesn't generate enough revenue, therefore allocating resources to create them is not worth it. So another possibilities that I can think of why there are fewer 4-star characters as of now, because by making a unique 4-star characters, the mechanics on that 4-star characters could have been used for another 5-star characters in the future. And on top of that, you guys should be aware, with gacha games, the more characters they make, the harder it is for the devs to keep making unique characters without breaking the game or affecting the balance of power between units. So there's some risks associated by just making a new character. The more 4-star characters they make, the faster it is for them to run out of ideas, and perhaps the more often people complain about the balance of power. It's quite tricky, you know? And even then, the question comes back, should you even make a 4-star characters that is just underpowered? So not releasing too many 4-star characters is probably the only way they can handle it at the moment until they can figure out a way to actually pumping out good quality characters while also at the same time having a decent quantity of them. Even the only game that I know who likes to make so many low-star characters, like FGO, recently the game have dropped in releasing number of characters that they release, but the game still managed to take advantage of the 4-star system by making another version of the existing character, mostly for summer events or characters from a collaboration from another Type Moon series, like Tsukihime or Kara no Kyokai. So usually a 5-star characters have a 4-star version during summer events. This way, if player never managed to get the 5-star version of the characters, they're able to get it via the summer events. Some of these characters might not be the strongest, but they're just nice to look at and to have in your collections and being used in the events, because usually these servants will give you some currencies that you can use to actually purchase stuff in the event shops if you end up using them. So you spend less time farming in-game by just using these characters. Basically, the more modern gacha games, instead of making a 4-star version of a character, they just release costumes. I don't know how good that is from revenue-wise, but I guess that is something that deserves to be studied, I suppose. And lastly, this is probably a minor thing. This is not exactly why they don't make more 4-star characters, but rather the effect of not making 4-star characters. Because from my observation that because they don't want to make a 4-star characters, and at the same time, they don't want to make a unique NPC because it's not worth it. So basically there could be a perspective saying that why should we make a unique NPC while we are not even allowed or we don't want to make a 4-star characters. 4-star characters at least will make players more excited, but NPC, we don't see them as often. Making unique non-playable character is not a norm for a gacha game, until Wuthering Wave that is. This is something that I really appreciate from Wuthering Waves because they make unique NPCs despite them not being relevant with the main story that much. They might not be as detailed as playable characters, but they are way too detailed compared to the common NPCs that just wander around mostly in Hoyoverse games. Hoyoverse is notorious for not having a unique NPC with a 3D model that is, because I can see some executives saying that if you're gonna make a unique character, might as well sell them and make them playable. More revenue, right? However, I think Hoyoverse have been better at it recently with Star Rail and especially ZZZ having more unique NPCs. That's one of the reasons why I really appreciate ZZZ world building, because the world feels more alive and there are unique looking people all over the place. So perhaps the trade-off of not having more 4-star characters, we are going to have more unique NPC instead, perhaps, moving forward? What do you guys think? More unique NPCs or more 4-star characters? But honestly though, I still believe with all my heart that Screwloom, Huayan, and Mr. Rekka will be playable one day in Honkai Star Rail. They're way too detailed for NPC. So basically for the industry, having a unique looking character but not being playable feels kinda weird. But that has changed to a certain extent. Well, that's all the insights I can provide regarding the reason why 4-star characters are not as common in the big gacha game space right now. Sorry, it's a bit messy, but I did my best trying to present my argument and analysis here. But personally, I'm on the side of having more 4-star characters, but I don't want them to be just a lesser version of a 5-star character. I would rather them to be a niche character that is competitive enough against 5-star characters in the specific setups. Or make it so that they can exist at the same time with a 5-star character in enabling a second team. So therefore, we need a challenge that makes us create more teams in tackling these challenges. So it's not redundant having 2 characters with the same mechanics. So I don't think this is a problem that can be solved easily. One thing that I would say is that the common player base doesn't consider the complication that might come in releasing new characters, from game balance, revenue, resource allocation, executive intervention, and many other reasons in game developments. So hopefully with this video, more video game players are able to consider some of these point of views when they're making their critiques or comments. Because baseless complaint without knowing what's going on is just annoying to see. So that's all from me. If you have some insight regarding this topic, do leave a comment so that all of us, including myself, can learn something from it. As what I've said so far, this is only based on the limited knowledge about game development and also based on my observation. So if you know more than me, tell us in the comment section. I just hope that moving forward, we're gonna get some fun 4-star characters. That is all what matters to me. Anyway, next video, we will talk about how to fix characters video again for Honkai style, and the next character will be Blade. So look forward to that as well. If you like what you hear so far, do leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It will help me a ton in keep making discussion videos like this, as I'm aiming to improve the quality and quantity of the videos that I'm currently make. I'm doing my best, guys. Until the next video, stay sharp, gamers.